Brad Johnson, you are a professor of psychology in the Department of Leadership, Ethics, and Law in the United States Naval Academy, and you are a faculty associate in the Graduate School of Education at the Johns Hopkins University. You are the author of 130 journal articles and book chapters, and you have written 14 books. That's amazing in the areas of mentoring, gender in the workplace, and professional ethics. And your latest book is Good Guys, How Men Can Become Better Allies for Women in the Workplace, which you co-wrote with David Smith. Brad, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Brad, we thought that this issue would go away 20 years ago, that eventually women and men will be in equal footing in professional corporate America and everywhere else, in politics, in sports, in every area of society. And still that is not the case. We are still lagging behind in spite of laws, in spite of good intentions, in spite of everything. There's still this discrimination. Sometimes is on purpose and sometimes it's unintentional, but still women are lagging behind. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing this topic to light once again.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Brad, can I ask you a little bit about your background? I mean, you have written so much. I wonder, how did you get into this field of expertise?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Elaine. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I've spent my entire career researching and writing about mentoring relationships. So, what does it look like when a mentor is really effective as both a mentor and a sponsor to somebody junior? And I've always been interested, Elaine, in the data showing that women in the workplace don't get mentored as much. The quality of the mentoring they get is often not the same. They often don't get sponsored, right? So loud advocacy in the workplace, women often don't get that the same way that men do. And I've always noticed that data. And, it's always kind of concerned me. And then a number of years ago at the Naval Academy in the US, my good colleague David Smith came along. And David does all of his research in gender work and family and retention of women and women in the military and these non-traditional careers. And it was really our conversations over a number of years about gender and relationships, cross-gender, and why men don't engage that led us to do the research for these two books. So we were interested in why is it that men don't lean into relationships with women? Because we know that for all the reasons that you mentioned a minute ago, women still face headwinds, they face discrimination, they face a pay gap in the workplace. And to get equity, men have got to lean in and be part of this solution. And so that was really the motivation for the work, to try and solve the issue of men engaging deliberately in gender equity through their relationships with women. And so that's the academic motivation, Elaine. And then there's personal, element here too. So I have one sibling, and it's a sister, and she also went into the Navy just like me. She is a Navy clinical psychologist. She is amazing. She has done it all, aircraft carriers and combat deployments and you name it. My sister has accomplished a lot, but she faces pushback because of her gender that I never did in the workplace. Men tell her to smile all the time. Men make her feel bad when she beats them in physical fitness races. How dare you outshine us? She's told that when she's assertive, that she is emasculating, right? Making men feel not masculine. And I got to just tell you, that's never happened to me as a male. No one ever talks to me like that. And so it was watching my sister go through her career that I think really piqued my interest and my empathy in the experience of women in the workplace. So I think it's both academic and personal for me. That's kind of how I got here.
I had an interview with a woman who is a venture capitalist, and I asked her how come men are getting more than women. And one of her answer is that men are relentless asking for more. And even when they get more, they even ask for more and they threaten to go somewhere else while women expect to things to arrive at their feet. And I wonder, what's your research on that?
Yeah, it's really an interesting phenomenon. I think there are a number of things going on here, right? So, number one, men often get promoted. They get advanced based on, quote, potential, right? He's got potential. We see that potential. Women have to prove it constantly, right? So, women have to have the job first in their prior experience before somebody will give them that job. So it's really quite unfair, right? Women have to have the experience, men only have to have the potential. So that's part of it. Women are also socialized more often to follow the rules, right? And so if there's a new job, a guy may, and there's 8 criteria to get that new job, a guy may only meet 3 or 4 of the criteria, but he says, yeah, I'm ready. So he puts his name in, right? And he might get hired because we see him for his potential. Women may meet 7 of the 8 criteria and they don't put their name forward because they don't think they're eligible. And so part of it is the way we socialize, boys and girls, men and women, differently. The other piece of this, Elaine, is a secrecy in the workplace about things like salary, right? Men often know what to ask for, they know what other people are making. Women, when they're in the minority, they don't get that information. They don't know what other people are making, so they're not sure what to negotiate for or what to ask for. So I think secrecy also plays a part here.
Well, how about, have you done any research on risk taking? It is my impression that guys are more willing to take irrational risk. I may even say things that don't make sense. And well, some of them may turn out. And if they turn out, well, I mean, look at Elon Musk, crazy person saying, I'm going to send a rocket to Mars. And
Yeah.
who's going to believe him? But hey, he's sending rockets to somewhere. And so that's an amazing risk. He risks everything he has, everything, every penny that he earned from, what is it, PayPal, to this. And I don't know if women are in the same scale of risk taking.
Well, so the data would show that men make more risky decisions, and that may sound like, in the case of Elon Musk, that may sound like a great thing, right? So it really paid off for him. But I can tell you, for example, in my world, in the military or in national security, what we're finding is that when you don't have any women on a operational team to plan the mission and to execute the mission, often you have less success, right? Because just as you said, men make riskier decisions, and that's not always a good thing.
Right.
Sometimes you really need diversity in thought when you're planning something to get a better outcome. And we just find it almost doesn't matter what profession or organization you're looking at. When you have more diverse teams planning and executing, you get better outcomes. You make better decisions overall. So I think we have to be careful not to focus on the couple risky cases that paid off, because that happens. Totally get it. And that may be more often men who are riskier, in their thinking. Um, but there's also something to be said for balance and care and diversity of thought in planning. We tend to get better outcomes overall. It's kind of like investing in the stock market. You could be really risky, and once in a while that may pay off. But boy, for the long haul, give me the balance.
Yeah, yeah, I get you. Okay, well, you are, your profession is psychology, but you put a lot of time aside to write articles, to write chapters, and to write books. Can you tell us a little bit about your development as an author?
Yeah, nobody ever asked me that question. I'm glad you did, Elaine. Thank you. Yeah, so it's really funny. I began my career as a clinical psychologist, and I spent 4 years in the Navy as a psychologist doing nothing but full-time work, seeing clients all day long. And it only took me a couple of years, Elaine, to realize I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I I was just not cut out to sit in a room hour after hour listening to depressed people. And someone's got to do that, and I really admire clinical psychologists who do that well. But I got most of my energy from being creative, not sitting and listening. So I found out pretty soon that I got most excited when clients would cancel their appointments and I would have extra time to go read and write and create something. And finally, I had a mentor during this time of my junior career, and I had this mentor said, "Brad, when are you going to realize that you'd be better off as an academic? You enjoy that a lot more. Why don't you just give yourself permission to do that?" And so I did, and I've entered this wonderful career that has been perfect for me because I get lots of time to just write and think creatively and collaborate with other authors. And I really love that. And writing is hard work, Elaine, as a lot of folks know, but I find it so gratifying to actually get something published and, have that product. That really is meaningful, especially when I find people buy it and read it and benefit from it in some way. That really speaks to me. So yeah, and just in terms of my journey, I really began writing scholarly academic articles, and then I realized at some point along the way, Elaine, only about 10 people actually read those.
Yeah.
So I turned to writing books, and that has made all the difference because people buy those, they read them. I think they really use them, they put them into practice. People want me to come and speak as a result of that, and I can tell you, no one ever asked me to speak because of an article I wrote. So
Wow.
it has made all the difference.
Okay, so let's talk about your book, Good Guys. Yeah, you open it with the story of your sister Shannon and how guys complain that she's in better shape than they are. But
Right.
also,
Right.
you divide it into three sections: interpersonal allyship, public allyship, and systemic allyship. So, can you just describe each one of those sections for us, please?
I will. Yeah. So David and I, when we did the research for Good Guys, the way our method for doing the research was to go interview lots and lots of women. And these were very senior women in different organizations and professions. And we asked them, what does it look like for you, or what has it looked like when a man really shows up as an ally in the workplace, when he's really doing ally behavior? What does that look like to you? So we interviewed all these women and we distilled all of their responses. And it really turned out there were kind of three big categories of things that great allies do. So you mentioned the interpersonal. This is really, how do I show up at work as a colleague every day? How do I hold myself accountable in my relationships with women that I work with? So how do I become a better listener? How do I avoid assumptions about her? How do I make sure that I'm trustworthy as a friend? How do I include her? How do I make sure that she's not left off an important invite list? How do I make sure that she gets invited, to speak or, do other things so she has those opportunities? How do I give her affirmation that what she experiences in the workplace is real, right? So when she experiences bias or sexism, can I validate that that's real? It's not her imagination. I can come alongside as a colleague and validate. So those are some of the interpersonal things. Then there's the public, and the public are really the disrupting ally behavior. So when I'm in a meeting and I hear that sexist comment or that really inappropriate joke, am I going to be a guy who gets paralysis and just sits there, or am I going to say something and disrupt it, right? Even if I just say, ouch, right, in the moment, and then when every eyeball in the room looks at me, now I can say, here's what wasn't okay with that. Here's what didn't land the right way. I can call it out. Am I going to make sure that I loudly advocate for women, right? Am I going to be a loud vocal sponsor for talented women? Am I going to push women forward for stretch assignments, even though other people don't think she's qualified? Am I going to take risks, right, to get more gender diversity in the workplace? So that's more of the public piece. And then the systemic, I think, is especially relevant right now, Elaine, in the pandemic, right? So the systemic is, how do I create policies and procedures? How do I create a workplace in my organization that works for everybody, including women? We know that during the pandemic, millions of women have been forced out of the workplace because they've been forced to choose between domestic unpaid labor that nobody else is doing, or staying in the workforce, as stressful as that may be. Women have also just had their jobs disappear more than men. So now is a perfect time for systemic allyship. How do we push flex work time? How do we guarantee paid childcare? How do we guarantee family leave, parental leave? How can I, as a guy, make sure that the workplace is structured so that women are able to work there and find the flexibility they need to do that? So loud advocacy, I think, is part of real systemic allyship.
I didn't see it in the book, but how do you deal when guys are feel uncomfortable? I'm sure you have heard of the Mike Pence rule when guys
Yeah.
feel intimidated by a woman, especially if she's good looking, no fault of her own. But guys feel nervous. They don't know how to react. They feel either too afraid to say something nice or 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 uh, or intimidated. So what's a solution for that?
Yeah, well, it's so funny. I'm not a big fan of the Mike Pence rule. You know, we hear that a lot. I think there are reasons why men are anxious, Elaine. Number one, men are nervous. They'll say the wrong thing, as you just suggested, right? Guys have a lot of anxiety about this in the workplace. They don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to be accused. They have different anxieties. I think that, you know, the Me Too movement, at least in the US, has really exacerbated that idea. It's made it worse. So now men are afraid that if they say anything, they might get an accusation, right? So as a result of that, men are not mentoring women as frequently as they were before the Me Too movement. Here's the problem with this: all of the stuff that we're hearing from men who say it's not safe to interact with women, it's just bogus. It's not true. It's based on false narratives about Me Too, right? Me Too is really straightforward. Women are asking to come to work and not be assaulted or harassed. It's a really low bar for men to get over.
Right.
But men have created these false narratives that it's dangerous to be in a room with a woman. It's risky. And Dave and I, my co-author, have looked at the data. It's just not true. Women don't make false accusations frequently. It's very rare. So as a clinical psychologist, I love to tell men who are anxious about that, there's only one treatment, and that's exposure therapy. You have to have more coffee, more conversations, more interaction with women to get less anxious about that. There's
Right.
no other way you're going to overcome your anxiety. You just have to get exposure. So, and then to your point about the attraction, Elaine, I would just say, for any guy who thinks that, maybe it wouldn't be okay to be with an attractive woman alone, that would be really, what would he do? There's all of this research in psychology where they'll go into a workplace and they'll have people rate anonymously, how attractive do I find everyone I work with? And then you also get to rate, to what extent do I think everyone is attracted to me, right, that I work with? And these studies show that one gender radically overestimates, mutual attraction, and it's men. so
Oh,
so message to all the men listening to this: she is not that interested in you. Let me just tell you, the research shows you may be attracted to her, but it's not mutual.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Before COVID, I used to be the owner of a dance school with a female partner. And when we were negotiating a new contract, let's say a corporation or a government entity, I always felt like I was negotiating against two entities. My partner itself, who was saying, "Oh my God, don't ask that price," and then the client itself, that he will say, "Oh, that seems quite high to me." So, but very often I got what I asked for. I think I portrayed the confidence and demeanor and whatever, but my partner was always afraid that I was asking too much. And I wonder if this is to the detriment of women, that they at least in my partner's case, she was always selling ourselves as a school too low.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is data, again, showing that men are more comfortable not only with risk taking, but they're comfortable being maybe overconfident in what they
Mm,
ask for, and they're often socialized that way, right? Boys
mm,
get permission to do that when they're very young, and we cheer them on when they're really confident, right? And maybe too confident. We cheer boys
right,
on. We tend to not do that so much for little girls. We socialize them differently, and we reinforce girls who are kind of quiet and demure and seem to follow the rules. So I think men and women can bring different patterns and levels of comfort into the workplace as a result of that. You know, in terms of the example that you give with your partner, I think some of it can lead to a great conversation, right?
mm,
So if I'm mentoring a woman and I think that she's not asking for enough in salary or whatever it is, sometimes just having a conversation like, I think you're worth a lot more than that. Can we have a conversation about why you're not asking for more? And sometimes just hearing that can create some change. You know, setting a more audacious vision for her about what she's worth and what her value is can be a great ally mentoring conversation to have. And, you know, and then maybe you as the guy get to check yourself and just make sure you're not being overconfident. So
right, right. Yeah, I've been
maybe,
slapped on the face more than once, figuratively
right.
speaking, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so how, as guys, how we can develop that muscle of having a more broader gender intelligence? I guess being more around and having coffee with women, or being more exposed to. You mentioned all the kinds of hardships that women have that we are not even aware of. So is that something that you suggest, just to put ourselves in their shoes to experience all the hardship that they go through that we are not even noticing?
Yeah, I think you framed it really well, Elaine. I think there are kind of two, you know, in terms of improving my gender intelligence so I can be a better ally for women at work. I think there are kind of two levels here that come to mind. Number one, do my own self-education first, right? I think there's a danger in asking women to educate you about gender in the workplace. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that I, as a guy, I can watch your episode of this podcast, you know, and inform myself that way. I can read books on gender in the workplace. I can read, you know, Good Guys, my book. There's a lot of stuff that I can do to self-educate and learn more about what women remember, are not a monolith. So I'd like to understand about women, you know, Black women, intersectional women of color. I'd like to understand women generally in all their varieties a little bit more. And then once I start developing good friendships with women, I would like to ask them about their experience to validate what I'm reading and learning about. So with a trusted colleague, I may say, would it be okay if I asked you about blank? You know, ask her about her experience. And if she's comfortable and if she trusts me, she might tell me about some of the challenges she has and
Mm,
I might not even see, right?
right.
So she may say, Brad, hey, you know, that meeting that you and I were both in last week, I got interrupted 5 times. And
Mm,
I don't know if you noticed that or not. And I bet I didn't notice, right? As a guy, we tend not to notice that. But if she shares that with me, now in the next meeting, I'm going to be looking for it. But I think as a guy, I need to ask women who I've earned trust with about some of those experiences.
well, I tell you, I'm guilty of public allyship. In the past, until I have my business partner, who's a woman, I was the kind of guy who will keep quiet when somebody else made a joke. Oh, that woman looks nice, or whatever. Whatever. And I will either keep quiet or laugh among the guys. And then eventually, I discovered my wrong ways, and then I became to say something, but that took so much courage. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just incredible the amount of courage that it takes among guys to say, hey, that's not right. I wonder, is there any suggestions that you could give in order for us to have the courage to stand up and say something, or other ways in which we can sponsor women loudly?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. So I think number one, so thanks for sharing that because I think a lot of guys have had that experience. You know, we've all been there, right? That very uncomfortable moment and the silence that follows, and we're all looking around the room hoping someone else will say something, right? And that's painful. Um, so strategies. Recognize first of all that all the research shows that even though you may think every other guy in the meeting thinks that's okay, what just happened, most men are not real tolerant of sexism. Most men don't think that was okay. We just don't say anything. If you're a guy who's afraid of losing your masculinity or suffering the wimp penalty, recognize that once a man disrupts something like that, um, other men in the room often come alongside, right? Because often we're just waiting for someone to disrupt it. And if you're that guy, don't be surprised when other men come up to you afterward and say, thank you for saying something. You were right. And then the next meeting, you'll find more men calling things out. So often it just takes that one courageous guy to disrupt the pattern in a meeting. And then the loud sponsoring you mentioned is another thing men can feel weird about, right? What will people think if I'm loudly talking about a woman, you know, when she's not even in the room, when I'm saying, hey, she's great, we should consider her for this, whatever it is. Some men are afraid that'll be misinterpreted, right? That there's something weird going on between him and that woman he's advocating for. I don't think there's a solution to that other than overcoming that. You need to get comfortable with it. If you're a guy who loudly sponsors men and women, I don't think there's any gossip. There's no story because everyone just knows, hey, that's what Elaine does. The people that he really sponsors, he's vocal about them. And whether it's a man or a woman, that's just his brand. That's what he does. So I would challenge men to ask themselves if they're mentoring women, if they're colleagues with talented women, are you talking about her when she's not even in the room, telling other people how great she is and what she's accomplished? That's part of your job as an ally. So give that a try, even if it doesn't feel comfortable.
Wow, this is good stuff, Brad. I guess, can you tell us, let's end it there. Can you tell us one more time the title of the book and where can people follow you and your partner, David?
Yes, certainly. So the name of the book is Good Guys, How Men Can Be Better Allies for Women in the Workplace. And the best place to find Dave and I is at a website called workplaceallies, all one word, .com. So workplaceallies.com, and you can find out a lot more about what Dave and I are writing and some of the speaking we're doing.
Brad, thank you so much for being here.
Glad. Thanks for having me, Elaine.